Hi, everyone. So the name of our study is called Increasing Physical Activity. We're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Ryan Andreassi, but I use my maiden name Peterson for school. Um, I'm 25 years old and live in South Bend, Indiana. I'm in my second semester at Ball State, and I used to work with individuals with disabilities at my last job. Right now, I'm actually a counselor at a pregnancy care center, but I do have experience working with individuals who have disabilities and who are on the autism spectrum.
My name is Kelly Bernard, and I'm 26 years old, and I live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I've been with Ball State University. This is my second semester. I work for an ABA agency where I'm a behavioral consultant, and I've been a behavioral consultant for 2.5 years. And I work with individuals with autism in their schools, homes, and communities.
Hi, my name is Brienne Ellis. I'm 24 and I live in Kokomo, Indiana. I'm in my fourth semester at Ball State, and I've worked at a multidisciplinary clinic for 2.5 years. I started out as an ABA therapist, became an RBT, then did program coordinating and assistant training, and right now I'm an assistant consultant.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Fishman. I am 30. I live in Lambertville, Michigan. This is my second semester at Ball State. Next semester will be my third because I have a master's in psychology from Marietta College. I work at an ABA clinic. I've been there for about 6 years, and we specialize in clinic-based programs for early intervention kiddos, earliest diagnosis to about age 6 with autism spectrum disorder.
Hi, my name is Kelly Scholler. I am 25 years old and I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I am in my third semester at Ball State University, and I have been at an autism center here in Fort Wayne for 2 years now as a lead therapist.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Exercise is one of the most primary ways individuals can maintain their overall well-being. It's important for children and adults to find ways to stay active. Neglecting time for daily physical activity can be detrimental to one's health, and unfortunately, too many people overlook this fact. For example, the CDC reported in 2013 that the obesity rate of individuals in the United States was 35.7%. They also reported that these findings were comparable to increased obesity rates in other countries. This indicates that obesity is not just prevalent in the United States, but is on the rise around the world as well. For many individuals, the problem is not that they're unaware of the benefit exercise could have for them. Rather, they struggle to find ways to exercise that are low cost and unobtrusive. Another thing that keeps some people from exercising is a lack of motivation or a set goal. Thankfully, much research has been done concerning what methods have helped people successfully increase their amount of physical activity without it being a major inconvenience. Many studies have shown that contingency management can be used to help individuals increase their amount of physical activity. Contingency management is when a reward is delivered for achieving a certain goal. According to Washington et al., researchers have used things as small as verbal praise and as big as electronics for rewarding participants for achieving fitness goals. In many of these studies, the individual's activity levels are measured by pedometers that count the number of steps the person takes a day. According to Gusmer, Serrard, and Pate, research has shown that pedometers such as a Fitbit or Actigraph are accurate and reliable in measuring one's daily physical activity. Counting steps is a great way for individuals to try and be more active because it is a low-cost method that allows for the individual to self-monitor their progress. Research also points to the benefits of exercising with others. Salvia et al. Stated that people exhibit increased physical performance when in the presence of their peers.
So the purpose of the Hayes and Camp study was to look at interventions and strategies to help increase physical activity during unstructured recess time for school-aged children. The study used self-monitoring and contingent reinforcement. It was used to track the number of steps taken in each 20-minute time interval session. The reinforcers for the Hayes and Camp 2015 study were small toys. These had to be $3 a piece or less, and they were given to the children immediately after they met their step goal during each session. So the participants for the replication of the Hayes and Camp 2015 study were 5 master's students from Ball State University, and each were enrolled in advanced applied behavior analysis in the fall of 2017. The participants engaged in stepping behavior, with stepping being defined as making the movement of lifting an individual's foot up and setting it down in a new position. This included, but is not limited to, walking, running, jumping, or dancing. And non-occurrences included swinging, standing, sitting, sit-ups, squats, or push-ups. Physical activity took place inside or outside and in different settings. A lot of this depended on weather conditions. Each of the participants in the replication study used a Pinko portable LCD digital pedometer instead of a Fitbit to track their steps, and their tangible reinforcers were the same and were worth $3 or less as in the original study. Some of the reinforcers used in the replication were stickers, ball, candy, pint of ice cream, bubbles, chips, nail polish, juice, glass of wine, and of course chocolate. The participants each used their phones and accessed a health app on there to take IOA data, and they had access of the internet in order to record their steps on a Google document. The study was a single subject ABA fee research design, and the materials needed were the pedometer and access to the internet in order to use the Google document.
So for baseline, during each baseline, each participant wore a pedometer attached to their right hip for a 20-minute session of free play, and this was 1 to 4 times a week. The screen on the pedometer was covered with tape, and the participants were not allowed to view the output screen until the end of the session to ensure that participants weren't keeping track of their steps, as that can be motivating for some. Participants set a timer for 20 minutes, and they could engage in walking, basketball, fixed playground equipment such as a jungle gym or maybe a rock climbing wall, and then loose equipment such as maybe a jump rope, and then activities in an open space like running or tag. Each participant recorded their data, start time, stop time, and initialed that they had reviewed the intervention guidelines on a Google document that was created to ensure treatment integrity. Baseline data was collected and recorded until the data was stable for each individual, and this occurred twice throughout our study. During intervention 1, each participant set their own personal step goal at 10% above the last baseline 1 sessions before the beginning of the intervention phase. This time, the participants wore an uncovered pedometer on their right hip while engaging in the free play options we talked about earlier. We got to check our steps throughout the session, and then physical activity took place 1 to 4 times a week, and the timer was set for 20 minutes. Once that 20-minute session was completed, the participants got to record their data this time, and they compared it to the previous sessions. And then each participant once again recorded their data, their start and stop time, and then once again we initialed that we reviewed the intervention guidelines. We also recorded if we gave ourselves reinforcement, if we did meet our goal meeting, or and then we recorded if we met or did not meet our goal. After 2 consecutive days of meeting our goal, we had to increase our steps by 20% of the 4 most recent sessions. And then once again, you immediately reinforced yourself with an item that was $3 or less.
So for intervention 2, each participant was given the goal to increase their steps by 20, 30, and then finally 40% of the 4 most stable recent baseline 2 sessions. They had to meet this goal for 2 consecutive sessions in order to increase it to the next percentage. So the participants wore an unmasked pedometer on their right hip while they engaged in their free play activities. Whatever they chose, it could have been walking, basketball, on fixed play equipment, loose play equipment, or engage in an activity in an open space. They would make sure to check their steps, though, periodically throughout the session to make sure they were on target or things like that. They would engage in this physical activity 1 to 4 times per week, which ran from a Sunday to a Sunday, and they would do it for 20 minutes. Once they finished their 20-minute session, the participants recorded how many steps they completed, and they would compare it to the 4 previous sessions. We would record our data, our start time, our stop time, and initial that we reviewed the intervention guidelines in the Google document that we created. We would also note if we met or did not meet our goal for that for us, and if we did meet, did we receive that reinforcing item that we had identified in our preference assessment that was $3 or less? We also collect IOA data. It was collected for all of the intervention sessions by a second pedometer, which we wore on the same spot but on the opposite side. And like we had discussed before, we used a health app on our phone. So IOA data was taken for 100% of the sessions, and the procedure rotated through participants. So I did it maybe the first session, and then another group member did it for the next session, and as follows. And we used the following formula to calculate reliability. It was the smallest step total divided by the largest step total times 100, which gave us our reliability percentage.
All right, now we're going to look at some of the treatment fidelity procedures that we addressed within our methods section. So although the original study, the Hazenkamp 2015 study that we were replicating, did not directly address our treatment fidelity within their study, we created a checklist based on information provided in our course that we reviewed prior to each of the sessions. This checklist consisted of vital step-by-step procedural information that was able to help that we followed the procedural protocol with the highest level of fidelity. And then some of these items on the checklist involved reviewing our operational definition of the target behavior, which was steps. We reviewed individual baseline information for each participant. We then reviewed each goal of the participant. Depending on which step of the intervention they were in, those goals were either a 10, 20, 30, or 40% increase from the past 4 sessions. Then we made sure that we had a timer to set for our 20-minute session interval. We made sure to engage in our target behavior of steps for 20 minutes. We made sure to stop and record our step total at the end of the 20-minute sessions. There was also a reminder to engage in self-report and record the steps from each individualized session. And then the final one was, if appropriate, to reinforce yourself immediately upon completion of your goal for that session.
So these are my results from the replication study. My average in baseline 1, was 2,175 steps, and the range of steps were 1,856 to 2,403. Then in intervention 1, my average number of steps were 2,184, and then the range was 1,800 to 2,352 steps. Likewise, in baseline 2, my average was 2,147, and then my steps range between 1,987 to 2,315. And finally, in intervention 2, my average was 1,866 steps, and the range was 1,681 to 2,163. So if you take a look at my graph, I did not meet my goals in any of the interventions. I found that the items weren't as reinforcing as they necessarily should be, and that I was more reinforced by slowing down in pace or taking a break than I was by the tangibles.
Okay, so for my results, baseline 1, my average was 2,119 steps, and then those steps range from 1,987 steps to 2,309 steps. In intervention 1, my average was 2,339 steps, ranging from 2,107 steps to 2,535 steps. In baseline 2, my average was 2,227 steps, ranging from 2,103 steps to 2,312 steps. And then in intervention 2, my average was 2,961 steps, ranging from 2,721 to 3,212 steps. So my averages were lower during my baseline phases, and then my final intervention phase, my average increased by 700 steps from the previous baseline. Which I felt like kind of showed a functional relationship. However, I do feel like some confounding variables came into play for me. I completed this with a peer who happened to be a college teammate, and we're both pretty competitive. We're both pretty self-motivated because we ran all our lives, and we're pretty competitive with each other. And I think another confounding variable that is that we're training for a race right now, so that was probably motivating in itself. She also provided herself with a reinforcer, so that also could have been another thing where we kind of became motivated and competitive with each other. But at the same time, Salvi et al., as it was mentioned earlier, showed that people increase their physical performance when they're in the presence of peers. So that could have also been a big play in my results.
All right, now to look at my results for baseline 1, my average was 2,151 steps. For baseline 1, my range was 2,107 to 2,170. Intervention 1 average was 2,542 steps. Intervention 1 range was 2,370 to 2,390 steps. Baseline 2 average was 2,166 steps. Baseline 2 range was 2,155 to 2,175 steps. Average was 3,296 steps, and intervention 2 range was 2,819 to 3,922. So taking a look at my graph, within intervention 1, I was able to meet my first goal kind of quickly within the first 2 sessions. And then it took me a little longer still within intervention 1 according to the criteria to reach goal number 2, which was that 20% increase based on my previous 4 sessions. You can see that I returned to a little bit lower of a step frequency for baseline 2. And then as far as intervention 2 shows, I was able to meet criterion for goal 3, which was that 30% increase from the previous 4 sessions. However, when it came to the 4th goal, it was much more challenging and I got close to meeting that goal, but ultimately was not able to, which I will discuss kind of in the limitations portion of this presentation.
Okay, so here are my results. My baseline one average was 1,356 steps with a range of 1,016 to 1,803 steps. Intervention one average was 1,789 steps, so a pretty decent jump there, with the range being 1,345 to 2,193 steps. Baseline two, I kind of dropped back down a little bit with an average of 1,644 steps. And my range there was 1,012 steps to 2,123 steps. My final intervention phase, the average was 2,063 steps with a range of 1,901 to 2,213 steps. So when I started doing the physical activity aspect of it for my first baseline, I found out right away that you really got to make sure you keep up with, you got to keep on stepping. Like you can't stop and get distracted. And I was kind of doing that because I was going out on walks and things like that, just appreciating nature and whatnot. So I found out right away that you really got to keep up with your steps if you're going to get enough to meet this goal. My first intervention I actually did really good. I think I liked the challenge, and so I actually got up to my 30% goal for that final phase. And then for my second baseline, I kind of dropped back down a little bit. And then for my next intervention, I stayed up there pretty well. I think in the end, motivational wise, like the actual type of activity that we were doing wasn't as motivating. So I think I only got to like my 20% goal for that last intervention phase. For me, the type of activity I like to do is more of like, I want to go do yoga or I want to go to a Zumba class. So I think just like the, walking or running, the type of activity that it took to get good results with this study kind of failed me in the end. But overall, I think it turned out pretty well.
All right, so these are my results. For baseline one, my average was 1,661 steps. My baseline one range was 1,201 steps to 2,128 steps. My intervention two, the average, which did increase, was 2,022 steps. And my intervention one range was 1,822 steps to 2,444 steps. Baseline two average was 1,874 steps. And then my baseline two range was 1,621 steps to 2,012 steps. And my intervention two average was 2,246 steps. And my intervention two range was 1,976 steps to 2,402 steps. So baseline one, obviously I had the least amount of steps, I think because I haven't done much physical activity. So getting out there and making myself do some of that, I was not really motivated, and I would take some breaks and get distracted a little bit. And intervention one, I was able to meet my goal 2 out of 5 days. I was motivated for some of the reinforcers, which helped me to meet my goal. And then back to baseline two, I did go down because I wasn't as motivated because I wasn't receiving any reinforcers. And then for intervention two, you will see that I was able to meet my goal 3 out of 5 days. I was about to increase to the 20%, but I had hit the 2 yeses on the day 4 and day 5. I think why I wasn't able to get up to that 30 and 40% was because I wasn't as motivated for the reinforcers because they were only $3 items or less. And also sometimes I did this activity with a friend of mine, and sometimes we would get distracted with talking. So, but I think overall, I definitely need reinforcers to motivate me to engage in some physical activity. And then just looking at the results from everyone. So I combined all the averages and ranges. So you can see from baseline 1, the average was 1,892 steps, and the range was 1,016 steps to 2,403 steps. And then when going into intervention 1, we did see an increase, which went up to 2,175 steps. And the range was 1,348 steps to 2,788 steps. And then going back to baseline 2, we did see a decrease a little bit in steps, which was 2,011 steps, and the range was 1,012 steps to 2,315 steps. And then intervention 2, which was the highest amount of steps on average, which was 2,505 steps. And they range from 1,681 steps to 3,922 steps. So even though we had some people that met their goals and some people that didn't, you can still see that the numbers were lower, the averages were lower in the baseline phases, and they were higher in the intervention phases, especially during intervention 2, which was our highest. And then we have another bar graph which shows the average percentage of MVPA, which is moderate vigorous physical activity. So each of the participants found the average percentage of a 20-minute session that met greater than 99 steps per minute during each phase. So during baseline 1, 2, and interventions 1 and 2 as well. So everybody has 4 graphs except Ryan, who does not have one because one of hers was 0%. So you'll see on the first bar graph, the A's represent baseline and the B's represent the intervention. And this just said how many of us met that 99 steps per minute in a percentage form.
Okay, so kind of like Kelly just discussed, the data suggested that the use of a pedometer as a form of self-monitoring and then also receiving a reinforcer contingent on reaching a set goal can increase an individual's physical activity. Our results in the second intervention as a group really showed a big jump in the amount of steps that we were able to get in that 20-minute session. In intervention 1, 3 out of the 4 participants met their goal of 10% more steps than baseline for at least 2 consecutive days. And then in intervention 2, still 3 out of 4 participants met their goal of 20% more steps for 2 consecutive days. And then 1 participant was able to reach her goal of 30% more steps for 2 consecutive days. No participants met their goal of 40% more steps for 2 consecutive days, but this could be due to the time restraint on the replication study. This could have kept some participants from being able to continue to try and reach their goal. And we might have been able, more of us might have been able to reach our goals if we had a little bit more time to complete the study. Although not every participant reached their goal during the session, all but 1 participant had a higher average of steps by the end of the study.
All right, now we're going to review some of the limitations to our replication study. So one of the issues that we kind of ran into when we were beginning to get our materials ready, gather information, and kind of get to work was some calibration complications with our pedometer. We had a large range across our group members, which some is due to natural activity, but others we kind of chalked up to issues with the device. So some of our members had about 1,400 or 1,044 steps, where another one for baseline had 2,403, which is a huge difference in steps. So we started to kind of communicate, and within our initial meetings, we kind of anecdotally talked about it and found that some people's devices were showing 0 steps for a 20-minute session or all the way up to 143 steps. So that kind of caused us to come back together, review the recalibration procedures that came along with the device, and then really make sure that we followed those IOA procedures that we discussed earlier that became even more important when we were beginning. Another thing that was maybe a potential limitation to our replication was the reinforcer effectiveness. Several of the group members kind of touched on that when they were reviewing their results section. And this is something that we have to put the question out there. Is a $3 price point an effective reinforcer, or is it kind of limiting? We wanted to make sure to keep that as the same as the Hayes study that we were replicating, just to keep that consistent. But it does pose the question, is a $3 price point effective for an adult versus the children-based population that this original study was conducted with? And then the reinforcers may influence the group members' goal achievement just based on whether or not they found those $3 reinforcers effective or not. Additional limitations, as we discussed, there may be an effect of peer influence on physical activity, and this is something that we could not account for. So in order to synthesize a peer influence, we did make a public document where each member recorded their steps each session. So group members could look at the goals that their peers were posting, which may or may not have had an effect on their individual step goal. In addition to this, it was kind of challenging for us to include that peer influence, meaning peer in this instance, meaning the additional group members. So due to our geographical limitations, it would have been impossible for us to have that live session component to this replication study, which was something that by conducting their sessions, the original Hayes and Camp were able to account for that because it was conducted at a recess live session with children. So future comparisons on the social influence of peers and their effect on increasing activity in adults may be very interesting. As stated before, we had several group members who did conduct some of their sessions with an additional participant outside of these master level Ball State students, which they attributed that may or may not have had an influence on them reaching their goals. I believe that is it for our presentation, so thank you very much.